Hi, Ben. Hi, everybody else. I'm Blake Armstrong. I have been working in the film and television industry for the last 20 years, and I write. I've been working on set for the last 20 years. I've been associate producing recently, and I have had a few small things that I've written win some awards. And I'm here to talk to you today about the Iliad. I'm now going to be I'm going to be teaching the books that I read now because I feel like it's the best way to cement my knowledge. So you're all out there helping me. And Ben, this is for you. So I am here drinking a beer. Sorry I can't be joining you, but cheers. Today what I want to go over is what I call the Thesaurus of violence within the Iliad. There's a lot of great summaries of the book. I have summed it up a few times, but if you want to find some summaries online from people other than me, scholars, people who know what they're talking about, you could even go to the Wikipedia, and honestly, the Spark Notes does a pretty good job of summarizing the story itself. But this book, this story, is about rage. It is about rage, and it is about violence. So I want to go over today the Thesaurus of violence. Over the next few weeks, I want to go over all of these things because they impacted me as both a writer and a human. The Iliad is a thesaurus of violence, epithets and titles as epic weight, a flat arc versus a moment of change, which, Ben, you and I have been talking about a lot, why Achilles doesn't kill Priam, the cost of duty, and why a powerful warrior does not necessarily equal a hero. So one more thing before we go on. If you're not all about rage and don't want to hear about graphic violence, this episode isn't for you, and that's cool. We'll catch up later. We'll catch up later on another series, maybe on the Odyssey, maybe on the Tartar Steppe, maybe King Arthur and his knights, Galahad and the Grail. I think I'm even going to do Babe the Gallant Pig. We'll catch up. If you don't want to hear about rage and violence, and specifically the graphic nature of the violence in this story, we'll see ya. But rage. Sing to me, O muse, of Achilles' rage. The very first line, the very first word is rage. Yes, Achilles is one of the protagonists, but the story is about the burning rage that is most frequently seen through his lens. All the characters, all of them, experience rage within this epic. Homer doesn't flinch when he shows the brutal truth of this human emotion, rage. And how did he depict this rage so clearly and thoroughly over an entire epic without it getting stale? Well, the language used across translations and over time, including both Butler and Fitzgerald's translations of the Iliad, has some of the most intense, varied descriptions of violence I've ever read. They're specific and brutal, and it's hard to read as they are to look away from. An ancient chariot wreck you can't take your eyes off of. The language used to describe the deaths in battle are so vivid that it transports you as the reader right to the shores of Troy more than 3,000 years ago. Book 17 has some particularly gruesome moments. This is when Patroclus is killed and the Trojans and the Greeks are fighting over his body and his armor. It's some of the most intense fighting in the book. So here is a quote from Fitzgerald's translation. But the act cost him his life at the hands of man-killing Hector, who struck him underneath his jaw and ear. The spear smashed his teeth, roots and all, splitting his tongue in half. Fitzgerald in Book 17. You can see it, all of it, in detail. It's horrifying and you can't look away, but you have to finish it if you want to finish the story. Hector is full of rage and grief as he sees the carnage on the battlefield, as the most intense fighting is taking place over Patroclus' body. Like I said, the Trojans are trying to steal Achilles' armor that Patroclus is wearing, and the Greeks want to keep Patroclus' body. They would love to get the armor too, but they need to get his body back. Something that a lot of people overlook here is Hector's feeling of grief. Some people criticize the Iliad as being a total glorification of war, but they seem to overlook that word grief. Yes, Achilles wants to achieve glory through bloodshed, which is achieved through war. He's not exactly the shining hero of this story, though. He turns the tide of the war and pushes the scales to where the Greeks eventually win. But he is not what causes the ultimate Greek victory. The Greeks win well after the events of the Iliad. The story of the Iliad is done and over with, and it's Odysseus and his cunning that brings up the Trojan horse and causes the ultimate downfall of Troy. Odysseus wins the war. Several times over in this book, the men talk about how they wish the war was over, how they wish it never had to be, and they respect the abilities of their enemies. So they try and extinguish the raging war, and they fight as hard as possible to win and to end it. And this intensity is what is shown in all of these passages. So here is Butler in Book 17. Again, I don't like Butler's romanization of the Pantheon, but that's just my problem because I'm a novice when it comes to all of this. Also, my pronunciation is horrible, so please forgive me, all of you scholars. I am but a mere enthusiast. Euphorbus was drawing back, and Menelaus struck him about the roots of his throat, leaning his whole weight on the spear so as to drive it home. The point went clean through his neck, and his armor rang rattling around him as he fell to the ground. His hair was like that of the Graces, and his locks, so deftly bound in bands of silver and gold, were all bedraggled with blood. Now, because this quote, I think, is so intense, I'm going to open up this copy of the Iliad I have here, which is both the Iliad and the Odyssey from Britannica's Great Books of the Western Canon, or Great Books of the Western World. It's a beautiful set, and it was put together by Mortimer J. Adler. So let me get to page 122 here, which is Book 17. Just a moment. All right, Book 17. Here we are. So Euphorbus was drawing back. Menelaus struck him about the roots of the throat, leaning his whole weight on the spear so as to drive it home. The point went clean through his neck, and his armor rang rattling around him as he fell heavily to the ground. His hair, which was like that of the Graces, and his locks so deftly bound in bands of silver and gold, were all bedraggled with blood. As one who has grown a fine young olive tree in a clear space where there is abundance of water, the plant is full of promise, and though the winds beat upon it from every quarter, it puts forth its white blossoms till the blasts of some fierce hurricanes sweep down upon it and level it with the ground. Even so did Menelaus strip the fair youth Euphorbus of his armor after he had slain him. Now this part gets intense. Or as some fierce lion upon the mountains in the pride of his strength fastens on the finest heifer in a herd as it is feeding. First he breaks her neck with his strong jaws, and then gorges on her blood and entrails. Dogs and shepherds raise a hue and cry against him, but they stand aloof and will not come close to him, for they are pale with fear. Even so, no one had the courage to face valiant Menelaus. Super intense. Butler again, later on when Achilles has returned to the battle. He struck him in the belly near the navel, so that all his bowels came gushing out onto the ground, and the darkness of death came over him as he lay gasping. And again later. And Achilles cut his head off with a blow from his sword and flung it, helmet and all, away from him, and the marrow came oozing out of his backbone as he lay. Here's more from Butler when Hector is almost killed in a chariot wreck. He missed him. Somebody missed Hector with their spear, but struck his charioteer and squire, Eniopius, son of noble Thebaius, in the breast by the nipple, while the reins were in his hands, so that he died there and then, and the horses swerved as he fell headlong from the chariot. The effort put into the visceral imagery echoes the effort every warrior is putting in to end this war. These visuals are coming from a supposedly blind bard. We don't know if Homer was a real guy, if he was a collection of people or whatever, but what we do know is that men of this era all fought within the Greek armies. That was part of everyday life. And all of this imagery sounds like it comes from firsthand experience. So if Homer was a blind poet, maybe he was blinded in battle, because he definitely saw some nasty stuff. But why all this focus on violence from me? Other than how well it puts my reading experience right on the battlefield and how much true fear it invokes, there's a staggering variety in these vivid images. Do I ever want my readers right on the battlefield? Yes, I do. Do I want them to feel dread when the time is right? Of course. Do I want my action to be vivid and fresh? Yeah, seems like they got vivid and fresh even 3,000 years ago. Now, if I need something violent to befall one of my characters, but I want to add a layer of metaphor to the action, I now have a full thesaurus of violence I can pull from to inspire my action. If I've got a big talker whose words caused a lot of trouble, maybe he'll get impaled through the mouth and lose his teeth and split his tongue in half. Maybe the coward has his backbone severed and what little marrow there is oozes out. Perhaps the liar or the stool pigeon who spills his guts will spill his guts. Or it can just root you in the physical space among the nameless dead in the horror of the battlefield. Armed with all of these examples and more, you now have the option of how you want to present your violence and your choosing of why you present your violence the way you do. So Ben, and everyone else, that is some of the violence of the Iliad. The next closest thing that comes to me is Conan the Barbarian, an axe splitting a man's skull to the teeth, or Blood Meridian, just about anything in there. Also My Confession by Chamberlain, which Blood Meridian is based on. And then,
Dad,
yes.
do you smell something that smells like fire?
I do smell fire. I wonder if that's coming from outside. All right, everybody, there was no fire. It was our neighbors. They were having a bonfire. It drifted in through our windows, and that's what we were smelling. So it's all good. Ben, what I wanted to say is that you could take these examples and think about how a broken ship mast might function like a spear, and maybe a broken ship mast punches through a man right beneath the nipple before casting him headlong into the rolling ocean. And you can think about the specificity of what a wolf might do to a man's leg, or what a bullet might do to a bear's head. But again, this is all just at your disposal, and people have been drawing upon this type of language since the beginning of some of our earliest written works, like this here in the Odyssey. Next time I want to talk to you about titles and the motif and the language around these titles and how I think it could translate into something cinematic. All right, good talking to you, and I hope to see you next time. Bye. All right, you want to press the stop button?
Where's this?
Same as the start button.